We're going to do a quick review for the quiz coming Thursday here. Here's the vocabulary startup. Uh, as it states, maps have grids to locate cities. The coordinate plane is a type of grid that is formed when two number lines intersect at their 0 points. The number lines separate the coordinate planes into four regions called quadrants. An ordered pair is a pair of numbers such as 1 and 2 used to locate or graph points on the coordinate plane. The x-coordinate corresponds to the numbers on the x-axis, and the y-coordinate corresponds to numbers on the y-axis. Let's take a look at the coordinate planes. Cartesian's plane quadrant, as it states here, has four coordinate planes: quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. They reside, or they are split up, I should say, by the x-axis and the y-axis. All right? Everything in quadrant 1 is going to be positive, positive. Everything in quadrant 2 will be negative, positive. Everything in quadrant 3 will be negative and negative. And everything in quadrant 4 will be positive and negative. In this table here, and this is going to be one of the questions asked you on the quiz, which graph displays a proportional relationship? Well, as we learned in class, proportional relationships are lines, okay, that are formed by coordinates on your graph, in other words, ordered pairs that are plotted across your graph, and the line must go ahead and pass through 0. It has to be a straight line that goes through 0. As we see in number 1, the first coordinate plane, we see that in quadrant 1 here, we do not have a line that goes through 0. So even though our line is straight, it is not a proportional relationship. On our second one, we see that it does go through 0, but our line is not straight. That means, again, it is not a proportional relationship. Now on our last one, the line is straight and it goes through 0. This displays a proportional relationship, which means from beginning to end, our rate is going to be the same. If I was to look at this rate, it goes up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. And it will keep on doing that indefinitely, and that's a rate of 1/2. So this would definitely display a proportional relationship. All right, writing solved proportions. Here's a definition to be sure to know. A proportion is an equation stating that two ratios or rates are equivalent. That's displayed by numbers such as 6/8 equals 3/4, or in algebraic terms. And it's very important to remember our algebraic terms. A over B equals CD, as long as B and D do not equal 0. Let's consider the following: AB equals CD. Well, in order to go ahead and make sure that we simplify this correctly, we must realize that our two denominators need a common denominator. The only way to do that is to multiply them to each other. That means we will multiply each side by BD and divide out the common factors. And if I do this, we see that we have BD times A over B and BD times C over D. We eliminate B's because anytime we have a letter over a letter, that equals 1. Any number over itself equals 1. Since these variables represent numbers, we know whatever the number is, it's going to be divided out into 1. That leaves me A times D equals C times B. And that's how we simplify that. We do the same thing with numbers. The product AD and BC are called cross products of this proportion. So the cross product of any proportions must be equal. So in this case, 6 over 8 equals 3 over 4. 6 times 4, well, 6 times 4 equals 24. And 8 times 3 equals 24. Do we see this is proportional? Because when we take our cross products, we get 24 over 24. Here's an example of one of the problems that we're going to have to learn for our quiz. After 2 hours, the air temperature has risen 7 degrees Fahrenheit. Write and solve a proportion to find the amount of time it would take at this rate for the temperature to rise an additional 13 degrees Fahrenheit. It says we're going to write a proportion letting t represent the time in hours. Well, if t is the time in hours, then we know that 2 is represented by t and 7 is represented by the degrees in Fahrenheit. So when we write this out, we have temperature over time, and that's 7 over 2. 7 degrees Fahrenheit every 2 hours. Now it also says find out, write and solve a proportion to find the amount of time it will take to go an additional, to raise the temperature, okay, for this temperature to rise an additional 13 degrees Fahrenheit. And Fahrenheit goes on top, so we'll put the 13 there. Now we're going to cross multiply. If I know that AB equals CD, well, that means that 2 times 13 equals 7t. Well, 2 times 13, that's pretty easy. That's 26. And 7t, well, that tells me I've got to get 7 away from t to find out what t is. I need to divide both sides by 7 in order to do that. That gives me 7 over 7, so I can cross out the 7s because any number over itself equals 1. And that gives me t equals whatever 26 divided by 7 is. That equals about 3.7. So it will take about 3.7 hours to rise an additional 13 degrees Fahrenheit. Here's another example. If a ratio of type O to non-type O donors at a blood drive was 37 and 43, how many donors would be type 0 out of 300 donors? Well, let's first remember, we don't want to put 37 over 43. They're saying there's 37 O-type donors and 43 non-type O donors, which means we have to find out, just like if we had a pizza and it said 3/4, so it'd be 4 pieces of pizza, and we're talking about 3 of the 4. Well, in this case, we have 37 O donors, and we have to see how many total donors are there. Well, that's 37 plus 43, and that's going to give us 80. So our first fraction is going to be 37 over 80. Now, once again, we're talking about total donors over here, and we're trying to find out how many O donors will be out of 300 donors. Well, that means 300 will have to be on the bottom because it's our total donors. We cross multiply again, 37 times 300, and we know we're going to get 11,100 equals 80t. That means we have to divide 80 out from both sides, and if we do, we know that t will equal 11,100 divided by 80, and that gives us 138.75. But remember, we're talking about people, and there's no such thing as 0.75 people. I know you people might be thinking, well, how about a person missing an arm? Well, that's still one person. So we need rounded up to 139 type O donors. All right, Olivia bought 6 containers of yogurt for $7.68. Write an equation relating the cost C to the number of yogurts. Why? How much would Olivia pay for 10 yogurts at the same rate? Well, this is very complicated, but really all it means is if I bought 6 containers for $7.69, how much would 10 containers cost? Well, that's pretty easy when you think of it that way. We have to divide 768 by 6 to find out how much one container would be. If I do that, I find out each container is $1.28. Now, I simply take the $1.28 and I multiply it by the number of yogurt containers they want me to find, which is 10. 128 times 10, well, that gives me $12.80. The cost for 10 containers of yogurt is $12.80. JC bought 8 gallons of gas for $31.12. Write an equation relating the cost C to the number of gallons. Once again, this is basically saying that I paid $31.12 for 8 gallons, and I want to know how many 11 gallons are. This example is another example of basically finding out what 1 unit is. I take $31.12 and divide it by 8. That gives me $3.89 per gallon, of course. Now I have to see how many 11 gallons is. Well, I take that $3.89 and multiply it to 11. That gives me $42.79. So the cost for 11 gallons of gas, $42.79. That's all for tonight. I hope I gave you a good clue of what to do for this test. Good luck. Good luck.